Hapiloe says, Thebe, stop harping on the fact that I am the new CEO. It's been 6 months, Hapiloe, but we are going to keep congratulating you because you must milk it. Because these men have been sitting on these positions, Haps, and now you and Pam Yako have got this. You got the land back. So congratulations one more time.
Thank you, Thebe.
We're going to talk about your Vision 2040, and Hapiloe, I'm trying to work out 2040 is how many years from now?
17.
Okay, hopefully I'll make it. I think I'll make it.
You will make it.
So you're not like the politicians. It's not 2063. So there's a line of sight there.
More immediate, yes.
More immediate. So to those of us in the room who are not so well read, how would you capture the essence of Vision 2040? What is it all about, or what is its biggest outcome?
Whenever this question comes across, I never know where to start. But let's start by just giving a very quick background of what South African National Parks is about. We are a conservation entity, so that's our largest mandate. We conserve cultural heritage, we conserve the biodiversity assets of this country. But the history of conservation in South Africa is a very difficult and perhaps painful one, because there's a history of dispossession of land and an imposition of how conservation would work in South Africa. So Vision 2040 is us saying, we can't carry on this way. There has to be a different way of doing things. We need to co-create with our key stakeholders a vision for conservation in South Africa for the future. Co-creation being the key point at this stage. And how do we reimagine the future of conservation? And it should not just be a solo effort where we sit in boardrooms and we write what we say is a future for conservation. We are reimagining and co-creating.
So how do you reimagine and co-create with somebody who does not have the land? I mean, what are some of the things that you are doing for them to feel owners of this land? Because I think you articulated that there's a history of dispossession. So I'm not sure if you are saying that you are going to give back the land and then work together, or I don't know. What's the benefit for them?
The issue of land is very tricky in South Africa, as you know. And a number of our parks are subject to land claims. But let's just talk about the Kruger, because that's the one that has perhaps the largest land claims. It's 2 million hectares. And the agreement that has been reached, not by ourselves, we are the implementing agency, but the Land Commission and the Department of Rural Affairs, is that we will compensate financially, which is what they did, and us as South African National Parks have to find or create a beneficiation scheme for the land claimant communities in perpetuity. A beneficiation scheme which really means ensuring that there's co-benefit, particularly commercially. So that's how we're dealing with the land claimants. But the land claimant communities are not the sole communities that are stakeholders or that we have obligations to. There are other communities that may have not been dispossessed of their land, but they are our neighbors. Just the Kruger National Park alone has got 3 million people on its borders. That's 2 million hectares. And most of our parks, 99% are in rural areas and poverty nodes. And we know what that means when we start talking poverty nodes in South Africa, high levels of unemployment, and so on and so forth. I don't need to restate that. But that's why the conversations about buying local become so critical.
But what am I buying local? I mean, you've got zebras and lions jumping around. So maybe you explain to me, what am I buying?
Okay, we conserve, but we also run a strong and viable tourism business, right? Pre-COVID, we were taking about 7 million people through our gates. We've got 21 national parks, 7 million people. So that should give you a perspective. We've got 15,000 beds. So we are a very large entity, a large player in the tourism industry. And that means that we consume a lot. We consume. So tourism has a long value chain, and we're all in this room, we know that. So it's not only just us as South African national parks. I think earlier on, Mr. Mabena was on stage. He's one of our concessionaires. This is companies, private players that we play landlord to. Mm-hmm. So we have the likes of him who run very glamorous things, the Shalatis and etc. They consume. They're consumers, they're procurers. And the question then is, how much are we buying from our local communities? Where are the tomatoes coming from? Are they coming from Nelspruit, Joburg, or are they coming from within a 20-kilometer radius of the park? And those are the conversations we need to have, because by so doing, we're then ensuring that the communities have a sense of ownership and a sense of accountability for the national parks. And that's why I'm saying the buying local is so critical. It's incorporating communities into our value chain as much as we can, and our supply chains, of course.
So you spoke earlier, but I'm hoping that this is in some policy somewhere, that when the Mr. Mabena sign up as concessionaires, that it's written there somewhere that your tomatoes are coming from Matlamin. And your potatoes from XYZ. And I know from a labor, I mean, I've been obviously to Mr. Mabena's place, and I know the people who work there are from the local, so I understand from a job creation as well. But you spoke earlier about heritage conservation. Then you're talking about culture and biodiversity. I couldn't put them together because when I've been to these parks, the only culture I've seen is some people coming around with a hot towel and jumping about and singing and and then welcoming me, and then they disappear. So, what other culture are you?
That's funny. Sorry. Let me recollect myself.
Unlike you, but you know what I mean, right?
Yeah, I think I do, but it was you got me at the jumping around. We're known, you see, conservation in South Africa is all about the animals. You said the zebras running around, right? And we forget that there is another rich asset or heritage asset for South Africa, which is the cultural asset. Let me firstly start by saying, within our parks, you'll be surprised about the number of archaeological assets that we have, that we protect. So we have a park called Mapungupa National Park, which is a World Heritage Site, by the way, and I'd invite you to visit. So we have a whole interpretation center. It's an amazing history of South Africa or the region, and how people lived in the 15th century and so on. So we have that archaeological element in many of our parks. We've got rock art, so we preserve that as well. But I think an indictment on us, and perhaps on South Africa as a whole, is that we don't sell cultural heritage as a tourism product as much as we should. And perhaps when we do sell cultural heritage, we sell the jumping around, as you had put it, which is all well and good. It is a different form of cultural heritage, but we're not going deep and into the rich archaeological history of South Africa. And that is my challenge as well to SA Tourism, to say, what are we doing about that? In addition, it's about the people. It's about the indigenous knowledge that these communities have. So one of the things that we do, let's say, for example, with the land claimants, is to try and provide opportunities for them to carry on with their cultural practices within the land that used to be theirs, whatever those practices may be. As we start talking about Vision 2040, we're beginning to say, to what extent are we incorporating indigenous knowledge? You know, we're a science-based entity. We drive the work that we do through empirical research and science. And we have totally ignored, this is now about conservation of biodiversity, the extent to which indigenous knowledge, there were people before the scientists were there, the people knew how to live with the land and live off the land, sustainably so. earlier on there was a talk about rooibos and the like, and how, the other example we make is Hoodia. Hoodia is a slimming, whatever it is, agent, which is actually something that the Khoi discovered. It used to keep them, sustained through long hunts, but now we use it for losing weight. But I use those two as an example of indigenous knowledge, and to what extent are we incorporating that into how we are conserving biodiversity? That's our challenge.
So one of the challenges that we are facing this past week, we had the Africa Climate Summit in Kenya, and we've got COP28 or something coming in Dubai. And one of the biggest discussions is around the impact of climate change. How has that affected you, and how are you mitigating or trying to work to try and alleviate the challenges of climate change?
Climate change is real. I know that there are a lot of naysayers, but it's real. We're seeing extreme weather events right across the world and right across the country. We're having droughts. When we experience floods that at extreme levels, what happened, I think in KZN, was it a year ago, should stand as an example. Actually, just earlier on this year, in February, we had massive floods in Mpumalanga, and that massacred Kruger National Park, in terms of our infrastructure. So climate change has got very tangible impacts for us. We are vulnerable as a country. We are vulnerable as national parks. The incidents that used to be once in 100-year events have now become once in 30-year events, once in 20-year events. First impact is infrastructure, as I said. We saw it in February. As I speak to you, Kruger National Park, roads have disappeared, bridges washed away. And then there is also the consumer element, because people prefer to be comfortable when they go on holiday. So if it's raining, if it's flooding, they're not going to go. If there's also the concept of desertification. So where places which were normally very verdant with vegetation become deserts, then they're no longer attractive to visit, or it's just simply too hot. So there's a two-sided coin there, and climate vulnerability is a solution we haven't found. We are still looking for that solution. But it does have very key impacts on our sustainability going forward.
So it's your sustainability, but it's then also the tourism sustainability.
Yes.
So how are you working with entities such as South African Tourism and other entities which are the regional tourism authorities? I mean, or do you work with them, or competition?
No, there could never be.
Oh, I just want to know.
There could never be.
Or is there competition here in the room, the ones who own the Southern Internationals and all those?
I think we cater for different markets, or sometimes we perhaps even have it's a value chain. So a tourist that would typically come to Sun City will at some point go to Kruger or to Table Mountain. So, I mean, the tourism industry is a collaborative industry. One cannot be without the other. But I just want to mention one thing. Earlier on, you were talking about how a brand is defined, what is at the core. And I want the room to consider this. What is at the core of what South Africa sells? And South Africa sells its biodiversity. We are in the top 10 of the most diverse countries in the world. And so us looking after nature, touching the earth lightly, protecting these natural assets that we have, should be top of mind for trade and for everybody in this industry. So we do collaborate. There is no competition. We're in 21. We've got 21 national parks in 7 provinces. Your other leisure accommodation facilities and activities, as I said, they're more there to enhance what we have to offer as a destination, as a country.
So my final question to you, I'm looking at the time, and Lynette is going to run my case. My final question to you is about money. You talk about paying land claims. You're talking about the impact of climate change, meaning that you're going to have to invest in the infrastructure. You are also while you are co-operating, I guess, rather than competing with all these other products. And if you're attracting people from everywhere else, you want them to have quality products as well. So it's not just the products that, the infrastructure that's damaged by land claims. It's not just land, by climate change, it's land claims and all those. Do you have money?
No. Okay, very seriously, before COVID, before the disaster that we know as COVID, one of the things we're proud of was that we derived 80% of our operating budget from our tourism business, right? 80%. So we're not entirely reliant on the state. But obviously, the last 3 years have been difficult. We've recovered. We're sort of 70%, give or take, from where we were in 2019. So that's pre-COVID, but I think we'll be fine. But that said, the challenges are there. So so what I'm talking about is the 80% was to sustain our status as we know it. Things change. The challenges are piling up. We need access to more funding or support. And we appeal to the private sector to say, come in, partner with us. You either become a concessionaire or you come on board with us and partner in, let's say, community projects, because that we will never have enough money for. It can't come from the fiscus. It has to come from somewhere. Everybody knows that this week there's been an email that's done the rounds, which is a directive to all government departments to say you shall cut your costs, right? So the future, at least for the foreseeable future of 3 years or so, we have to make a different plan. And I'll speak about community projects because one of the things I want the trade to appreciate about protected areas and how they interlink to communities is this. Once protected areas, which means game reserves, national parks, stop making sense to communities, once they stop making sense, in this environment of unemployment and these socio-economic and socio-political challenges, ask yourself what's going to happen next. So we have an immediate challenge to ensure that we bring our communities closer. So yes, we can only do that with the private sector. No, we don't have the money.
No, you don't have the money, no. By 2040, you'll be 21, and I probably won't be around.
Yeah.
How will you measure your tenure as the success of your tenure? What's the one thing you say, if I do one thing only right between now and 2040 and I leave this job, this would what success will look like? What is that one thing?
Well, I think by 2040 I'll have retired. In government there's a forced retirement.
So you've kicked it into the future.
Yeah,
let's assume you won't be retired.
You know what, for me, the issue of benefit sharing with communities is very critical. And if we achieve that, then sustainability is within our hands. We can't control climate, but in terms of sustainability, if we can get that right, I'd be very proud of my tenure.
So by 2040, we're going to hold Hapiloe Sello accountable for community beneficiation. Ladies and gentlemen, the new chief executive of SANParks, Hapiloe Sello. Hapiloe, thank you so much.